So can you think of other ethics issues that came up in the context of covering desegregation in Little Rock?
Well, one incident that came up, and this is toward the end of what I call the crisis in '59, when the moderates, that is, white school board members who were willing to accept desegregation in order to keep the schools open and to have and have peace, and winning out over dead-end segregationists who closed the schools in '58, '59, and who were willing to do anything to avoid desegregation. So in the recall election, it was a showdown where all 6 of the board members, 3 moderates and 3 dead-end segregationists, had their tenure challenged, and the public, by a very narrow margin, voted for the moderates to stay in and the dead-end segregationists to be ousted. At that time, all they needed was one more member to get a majority. In an act of generosity, they offered the defeated segregationists a chance to, no questions asked, give the appointing person the name of someone to go on the school board, and that person will be a 6th member of the board. He'll be outvoted, or she'll be outvoted 5-1, but will be on the board. The name they gave turned out to be that of a convicted burglar. And of course, our reporters, before the end of the day, were able to establish that he not only was a convicted burglar, but he was ineligible to serve because of this felony. And so the burglar came to see Harry Ashmore and said that it's a deal. I never was appointed. I'm willing to withdraw my name, and you don't need to report tomorrow. And Harry Ashmore quite correctly said that we don't manage the news. We only report the news. And you were appointed. You were found to be ineligible, and you have now withdrawn. We will report all of that. So I thought to myself, I think that's a good decision. But it's the sort of thing that I never studied in college. And because we did not have a course such as we have now in journalism ethics with case studies. And I said, well, maybe there ought to be something that we teach in college, editor's decisions or something like that, the kind of dilemmas, or maybe this wasn't a dilemma, but the kind of difficult decisions you might be presented with as a working journalist. And from all that, though, has evolved, I think, particularly in the last 25 years, the kind of courses we have around the country in universities now.
Well, the other question I wanted to ask about Little Rock was the desegregation of Central High School is a tremendously emotional issue. Was it hard for reporters to not get emotionally involved in on one side or the other? Was it hard to check people's bias or to want to step into the story in some way?
Yeah, so we not particularly hard. It certainly did present problems because a lot of people thought we were enemies of the state and treated us that way. But I think that we felt that the way to cover this is to treat everybody fairly, even though they were espousing a point of view that we personally did not accept at all, but to report them accurately and fairly. And a leading segregationist is Amos Guthridge, who was the lawyer for the Citizens Council, which has been called the Klan in suits. So they were a bit upscale from the people who wore the sheets, but they were dead-end segregation. And Amos was an amiable person personally, but he would make public statements that were, of course, crazy and wild, and we would take them all down. And at the end, he said, when I was covering one day, I just know that tomorrow morning when I read what I have just told you, that it will be distorted in the Arkansas Gazette. So I wrote that down too, and was putting my notebook away, and the session was over, and he put his arm on my shoulder and said that, Gene, I know you're going to write it straight. You're an honest reporter, but Harry Ashmore will change everything you wrote. And I knew that Harry never did that. But that's the way it worked out. Actually, I think that Amos did get a fair shake in the Gazette. But I will tell an occasion where Harry did interfere, and one that would appall us today. In that showdown election, where the last Saturday night, before the election on Tuesday, the people who were managing the campaign for the moderates sent over a news release that was simply recapping a whole lot of things we'd already reported. And I was sitting in as assistant the city editor that day for the Sunday paper. And I followed the guidance of the city editor, who was my mentor, that we look at all the news releases. Very often they're not very newsworthy, but sometimes they are, and we check it out, and if there's something there, we will then report it out. Well, I looked over this and following my instructions, I found nothing there, and I spiked it. And there literally was a spike that you put things on you're not going to use. That Saturday night, we were head-to-head the only time of the week with the Democrat, which is the afternoon paper weekdays, and we were the morning. But both of us had Sunday papers. So about 10:30, both first editions were out, and their paper would come to our newsroom, and we would look over and see if they had anything we didn't and everything. And Harry Ashmore was there to look at the Democrat, and the lead story in the Democrat was word for word this news release that I had spiked. And he said, "Where is ours?" And I said, "Harry, there was nothing new in it. Read the story. There's nothing new there." He said, "But we can't have that. These are our people. And we're, the Democrat who is on the other side is running their stuff, leading the paper with it, and we don't have anything." And I said, "I guess I better find that news release." And so I went to look for the news release, but the janitors had come through and had taken all the stuff off the spike, and the trash baskets were empty. And I said, "Harry, I don't have it anymore." And he said, "It's all right, I'll take care of it." And so he took scissors and clipped the story out of the Democrat and pasted it up, and we sent it to the composer, and that was our story for the main editions. And that wouldn't happen today.
Let's hope not. So you went from the Gazette to the New York Times, yes? Or was
Yes,
there something else intervening? Very different place.
Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
Sure. Do you think that was the moment for you when you became more interested in journalism ethics as opposed to just making decisions on the fly?
Yes, that's true, because I did get involved in that, and then somehow it came out, it developed that I became the go-to person when a staff member had a situation that may or may not be contrary to the code, and they couldn't find a clear direction in the code. The word of mouth was, "Go see Gene." And so we would sit down and we would work together and try to extrapolate what we had in there and make a decision as to whether that's good, something we could live with or not. And as I try to say in the book, a code can't cover everything, but it does set a tone, and it does give you a basis for making extensions of what it is in there. And I must say the staff was very much in favor of this. They felt that their reputation was tarnished by what Laura did, and living down the Annenberg years with Harry Carafin and all, and they felt that their reputation, as well as the papers, was being strengthened by a strong code that was diligently enforced. And so that's how I really got more involved in that, and we moved from there into writing a news code on how to cover the news, such as you don't put triple exposures to show blackbirds, and that sort of thing would be specifically ruled out, that manipulation of photographs. So we would add those as we would go along.
Did the Enquirer report on any of those efforts as, sort of the fallout or the aftermath of the Foreman scandal?
We reported on the Laura case, but
I mean, that the Enquirer had now adopted a code of
No, we
ethics
did not.
or,
and I think today we would, and I think today we'd post it on our website as the New York Times does. I think it's really good that a matter of disclosure and being responsible and accountable to the public. If you say, here are the standards that we try to hold ourselves to, and certainly by inference, they can conclude that they ought to hold us to that. And I think the bloggers would really enjoy that. that they can have maybe bookmark the Inquirer code. If they see something we did that was against that, they would have ammunition right there. But we were going through a period there where the lawyers were nervous about putting standards in writing, and much less in public. And their thinking was that if you have here are published standards, and then we did something differently, either through ignorance or by design, that in a libel suit, that a plaintiff's lawyer could say that you're negligent by your own standard. And I guess that concern still is out there, although I don't know of many cases, if any, that's happened. But I understand how they're concerned. But so the lawyers worked with us to write the code. The shall, you will, or you shall became, in most cases, we should, and things like that. So they tempered the language. We still got the point across. And I knew our lawyers were very good, and so they helped us. They knew we wanted to publish that, and they accepted that. And so they helped it in a way that they could defend if they found themselves in court, which I don't think they ever have. But they were partners in doing that. But I think you're right. If we were today, we would put it on the website. If we're going to have it at all, we ought to be willing to put it out there.
Well, because I'm curious to know what the public's role would have been, if any, in any big journalism ethics scandal. How much did you hear from your readers? Like with the Foreman, the Laura Foreman scandal, for example. I mean, was there a lot of public outrage, in the form of letters to the editor and so on, or is this kind of inside baseball stuff where people in the journalism world think it's a problem, but the public, either doesn't care that much or just figures, oh, that's just business as usual in journalism, and they didn't really expect journalists to be all that ethical in the first place?
I don't remember a whole lot of feedback from the public. I think today we would get a lot. But we, on the Laura Foreman case, Gene had Bartlett and Steele write an investigative piece that ran to a huge number of pages in the paper, and that Roberts didn't get to edit. He didn't see it till it was in the paper. And of course, that technique has been used several times. The Jack Kelly case at USA Today. David Shaw did that at the LA Times on Staples Center. And of course, the Times New York Times did it on the Jason Blair case. So we kind of set the standard there too. I'm not sure how many people read that, but it was a very thorough, if Bartlett and Steele did it, it was going to be thorough, and it was.
So you're mentioning of the Staples Center and Jason Blair and Jack Kelly leads to the question, is journalism less ethical than it used to be because we're seeing all these big journalism ethics scandals, or is it more ethical and it's just that there's more scrutiny now and we catch the perpetrators more than we might have in the past? Or do you think it's more complicated that journalism is more ethical in some ways but less ethical in other ways?
I see it as more ethical across the board, and I think that the fact that Jason Blair, Jack Kelly gets the treatment it does is that it is unusual today, and Romanesco on the pointer.org website that Romanesco collects transgressions, among other things, anything that gets in the paper. And most editors today feel that if they have a plagiarist or a fabricator, that they not only had to deal with that in a personnel standpoint, but they also had to publicize it because the audience has been misled. When that goes online, as it all does today, then Romanesco's search engines pick it up, and now everybody in the country knows about it. So I think all of that leads to an impression, which probably is shared by the public, that that journalists are crooks. Every time you pick up a paper, you're reading about somebody doing something like that. Well, that too is exaggeration, but the fact is that when I started in the business, that was simply didn't meet the standard of news because it wasn't unusual. Now it is. So now it gets published, it creates an erroneous impression. A few years ago, when we had a spate, this was 1998, when there were a series of ethical transgressions that were very high profile, there were some polls done, and the public thought that they do it all the time. But of course, we knew otherwise, and I think that it's only got better. More and more journalists today are better educated, and more of them have courses such as one you teach here at Penn State. So they've been exposed to this sort of thing. And I think that they have more practice of making decisions, and they've worked with case studies, and they know the principles, and they know what the standards of the profession are. So I would have to think that there's far less ethical transgressions today.